The lights came on, the trailers rolled, the posters glowed in neon across America's biggest theaters, a former First Lady, a powerful studio, a marketing campaign so massive it wrapped around the Las Vegas sphere. Everything about Melania Trump's documentary screamed blockbuster. And then people walked into the theaters and found silence, rows of empty seats, echoing rooms, more ushers than viewers. Yet somehow the box office numbers told a completely different story. Millions of dollars, top 3 opening weekend, one of the biggest documentary launches in years. On paper, it was a hit. In reality, it felt like a ghost movie. This strange contradiction, success without an audience, became one of Hollywood's most talked about mysteries of early 2026. Because never before had a film looked so profitable while looking so unwanted at the same time. The documentary followed Melania Trump during the tense days leading up to Donald Trump's second inauguration. Cameras captured private moments, behind-the-scenes preparations, quiet reflections, and carefully framed images meant to humanize one of the most private first ladies in American history. Amazon MGM Studios didn't treat it like a small film. They treated it like an event. Primetime commercials during NFL games, massive digital ads, billboards across major cities, celebrity-style premieres. Hollywood insiders estimated the project cost tens of millions to produce and promote, an almost unheard-of budget for a political documentary. The goal was clear. This wasn't meant to be niche. It was meant to be cultural. When opening weekend numbers rolled in, headlines exploded. $7 million. Some outlets even hinted it could reach $8 million. Industry reporters called it a shock success. Pro-Trump media celebrated it as proof America was hungry for the story. But then came the videos. Moviegoers started posting clips from inside theaters. Large AMC complexes in Manhattan with 6 people inside. Washington, D.C. showings where entire rows were empty. London cinemas selling barely a few dozen tickets in rooms built for hundreds. Journalists quietly went to screenings expecting packed houses. Instead, they sat nearly alone. The contradiction was impossible to ignore. How could a movie make millions and when almost no one seemed to be watching? The internet did what it always does. It investigated. People tracked per-theater averages, compared red state cities to blue state cities. Screenshots surfaced, showing sudden spikes in ticket purchases right before screenings, then empty rooms anyway. It appeared that the film performed strongest in heavily conservative areas, places like Dallas, Tampa, Phoenix, West Palm Beach, while major urban centers showed almost no organic interest. Even the demographics told a story. Most viewers were older, mostly women, overwhelmingly conservative, not a broad audience, not a cultural phenomenon, just a concentrated political base. Late-night comedians pounced immediately, jokes about invisible moviegoers, about tickets being sold to no one, about documentaries becoming rich without viewers. But behind the humor was a serious industry question. Was this real success, or was it manufactured momentum? Whispers began about bulk ticket purchases, political groups allegedly buying blocks of seats, supporters distributing tickets to boost sales figures, campaign-style strategies being used on a movie release. Nothing illegal, but definitely strategic. The goal wasn't full theaters. The goal was big numbers, because big numbers create headlines, and headlines create the illusion of popularity. Meanwhile, critics tore the film apart, calling it sanitized, unrevealing, a glossy public relations project rather than real journalism. Some described it as 2 hours of controlled imagery, carefully avoiding controversy, conflict, or uncomfortable truths. Ratings collapsed, single-digit critic scores, harsh reviews from major outlets, yet the marketing machine kept celebrating success. Amazon highlighted the box office milestones. Press releases framed it as a historic documentary win. But financially, the truth was darker. Theaters take nearly half of ticket revenue, so from $7 million, the studio might see only $3.5. Against a budget reportedly nearing $70+ million, including marketing, the theatrical run wasn't even close to profitable. This wasn't about making money in cinemas. It was about optics, visibility, narrative, making the documentary look like a cultural event, regardless of real demand. Streaming on Prime Video would eventually bring viewers, but the theatrical push was designed to create buzz, and buzz it created, just not the kind expected. Instead of crowds, the story became empty rooms. Instead of applause, it became memes. Instead of momentum, it became suspicion. People weren't talking about Melania's story. They were talking about how a movie could sell tickets to theaters that looked abandoned. It became symbolic of modern political culture. where perception matters more than participation, where numbers can be engineered, where success can be shaped, even if real engagement is thin. Supporters pointed to the revenue, critics pointed to the empty seats, and somewhere in between sat a documentary that technically performed well, while emotionally landing flat. In the end, Melania's film may go down as one of the strangest box office stories in recent history. Not a flop, not a smash, but a perfectly marketed illusion of demand. A movie that proves something fascinating about the modern era. You don't always need crowds, sometimes you just need the appearance of them. And in 2026, that illusion was powerful enough to make empty theaters look like a hit. The silence inside those theaters wasn't just awkward, it was symbolic. Because while the industry kept celebrating strong numbers, something far deeper was happening beneath the surface. Something that revealed how modern media success can be built without real public demand. As the second weekend approached, expectations were quietly lowered. Hollywood insiders knew the truth. Documentaries don't survive on hype alone. They survive on word of mouth. And this film wasn't getting it. Instead of people recommending it, the conversation stayed stuck on empty seats, strange ticket surges, and political optics. Attendance dropped fast. In some locations, showtimes were canceled altogether. In others, theaters moved it to smaller rooms, the kind usually reserved for late-night indie films. Yet press headlines continued pushing the same narrative. Stronghold, impressive performance. Another milestone. But behind the scenes, theater managers told a very different story. They described screenings where not a single ticket was scanned, entire evenings where staff outnumbered customers. One employee in Chicago joked online, "I sold more popcorn than movie tickets." I mean, even that wasn't much. And that's when the broader picture became impossible to ignore. This wasn't a movie riding public excitement. This was a movie riding a coordinated push. Political documentaries rarely aim for traditional success. They aim for visibility. They aim to dominate news cycles, to create talking points, to project influence. And Melania's film had achieved that, just not through crowds. It had achieved it through controlled momentum. Marketing experts explained what many suspected. Bulk purchases don't have to fill seats. They only need to register as sales. Groups can buy hundreds of tickets, distribute some, ignore the rest, and the box office still records a win. It's the same tactic used for best-selling books, music chart manipulation, and online trends. Not illegal, just engineered. And when paired with a massive promotional budget, the illusion becomes powerful. To the average headline reader, it looked like America had embraced the film. To anyone stepping inside a theater, it looked abandoned. Two realities existing at the same time, and that contradiction perfectly mirrored the political world the documentary came from. Where rallies look massive on camera but tight on angle, where numbers sound huge but context is missing, where perception often outweighs participation. Meanwhile, international markets quietly rejected it. In the UK, it barely made a ripple. Small earnings, low rankings, minimal attendance. Across Europe, distributors scaled back screenings quickly. Outside Trump's political base, interest simply wasn't there, which raised another uncomfortable truth. This wasn't a cultural moment. It was a niche mobilization. Supporters showed up where they were concentrated. Everywhere else, indifference. Critics continued ripping into the film's content. They said it avoided real issues, skipped uncomfortable moments, ignored controversies, presented a polished version of history instead of reality. One reviewer called it 2 hours of beautifully filmed nothing. Another wrote, "It answers no serious questions and asks none." Audiences who did attend often described it as slow, overly controlled, and emotionally distant. Not a story, a showcase. And that's when many realized the documentary wasn't meant to persuade outsiders. It was meant to reinforce insiders. A loyalty film, a branding piece, a visual extension of a political movement. From that angle, empty theaters didn't matter. What mattered was headlines. What mattered was the phrase, top-grossing documentary. Because those words travel, they get quoted, they get shared, they become proof of relevance. Even if the relevance is manufactured, streaming would soon bring far more viewers than theaters ever could. But the theatrical run had already done its job. It created the illusion of mainstream success. It turned a niche project into a national talking point. And in today's media landscape, attention is currency. The strangest part? In a way, it worked. For days, the documentary dominated conversations. News outlets debated it. Late-night hosts mocked it. Political commentators dissected it. Everyone was talking, just not watching. And that might be the perfect summary of modern influence. Visibility without engagement, buzz without crowds, success without substance. By the time Amazon prepared its streaming release, the theater story had already become legend, not for packed houses, but for empty ones. A movie that looked like a hit on spreadsheets and felt like a flop in real life. Yet it proved something powerful. In 2026, perception can be engineered. You can sell success. You can manufacture momentum. You can create headlines without audiences. And Melania Trump's documentary became the clearest example of that new reality. Not a failure, not a triumph, but a perfectly constructed illusion. One that will likely be studied by marketers for years. A reminder that in today's world, sometimes the story isn't what happens on screen. It's what happens in the numbers, and what those numbers are designed to make you believe.